Hello, Mrs. F1.
Hello, Mr. F1. This is weird. You're right next to me.
It is strange.
If you're watching on YouTube, guys, for the first time in multiple episodes, we're in the same room. And not even just in the same room, we're right next to each other.
It's weird talking to the computer, talking to her. I don't know.
It's so weird, but we are together again. And I think it's only fitting for the last race of the season. So much to talk about, even though I don't think the race was that exciting,
No.
actually. But let's get right into things. The race, I don't know. When you actually look back at the races we've had at this track, it's historically not been that exciting. I think last year, the only exception, the race was pretty boring up until the very end.
Yeah, and it was created excitement.
Yes.
It wasn't true excitement.
Yeah, but this track doesn't usually generate that much excitement, and especially coming off of Brazil, which is just jam-packed of drama and excitement. It was kind of difficult. I would say the two things to call out. Obviously, going into this race, Checo and Charles were tied for second in the Constructors' Championship. And Charles was able to hold on to that and came out with those points and locked in second place in the championship for him. It was a little exciting at the end. I thought for sure Checo might catch up to him, but I just think earlier when he needed to catch up, he didn't have the pace to do it. I think at the end he was 1.4 seconds off Charles.
Had he had 3 more laps, he probably would have got him.
Yeah, probably. But I really was like crossing my fingers and toes at the end there. I was like, please don't, like, just let him have.
Well, I think with that, your top 4 is correct. Remember 2 episodes ago,
Really?
I said that Checo was going to finish above Charles, but I think we both had Lewis P5 and he didn't finish P5.
So are you saying I was right?
No.
Yes, I
was. You didn't get all 5 of them.
Oh my God, I got close
You got the top 4. You were better than me. You got the top 4.
Top 4. So now that I can hold on to that for the rest of my life, that was a little bit of an excitement at the end there. Also, Lewis DNFing.
Yeah.
And
I honestly can't think of a time Lewis had a mechanical DNF since you and I have been watching Formula
One. Well, it was their first mechanical DNF this entire season. And I mean, I think him launching himself off the sausage curbs in the very beginning of the race definitely didn't help. It was a hydraulics issue, and he eventually just had to go off the track. That ended his last race for, frankly, a pretty horrible season for him.
Yeah. Like I said in our last episode, he is the worst of the top 6 in terms of points. No, seriously. I mean, he was, yes, the Mercedes was lagging at the beginning of the year and it couldn't keep up with the Ferraris and the Red Bulls, but look where George ended up.
Just right? Wow. I mean,
so I think it says a lot. It's interesting. You have to wonder if it's like a passing of the torch. George showed that he can outscore Lewis Hamilton. I mean, that's impressive.
That is impressive, especially when it's your first year in the team. You definitely showed your worth. And I mean, frankly, he carried that team into where it was at the end of this year. Yeah. Obviously, Ferrari and Mercedes in the Constructors' Championships and points-wise were still relatively close.
Oh, yeah.
So if George and Lewis were able to pull off what they did in Brazil, they maybe could have surpassed Ferrari, but obviously that didn't happen with Lewis DNFing. George had a pretty decent race. Mr. Consistency as always. But yeah, kind of a bummer, just like a really bad way for Lewis to end a really bad season.
Yeah. I'm excited to see him next year. I would think he's going to have a chip on his shoulder because he's so used to winning. He had a championship pretty much taken away. And then he had a year where, I mean, he wasn't even in it.
Yeah.
And at no point did it ever look, I mean, he didn't win. It's the first season in 13 years or something like that he hasn't won a race.
That's pretty crazy.
That's wild to think about. So
yeah,
you have to think he'll come back with a vengeance next season.
I saw Toto said that they're actually going to take this car and put it in the lobby of the facility to remind them of, like,
I did hear that
nothing comes easy and all the hard work they need to put in every single day.
Yeah.
I don't think Lewis will be adding this car to his own personal collection.
No.
So, but yeah, there really wasn't much besides there was just like a little contact between Mick Schumacher and Nicholas Latifi. And when I saw it happen, I thought, oh no, not again. Are we gonna have a 2021 scenario again? But in reality, it was Mick's fault. I mean, he did kind of tap the back of Nicholas Latifi's car, even though I guess you could argue Latifi was moving a little slowly.
And he was way off the racing line too. I don't know what he was doing, but at the end of the day, Mick is behind him and he has to avoid the contact. But they did do a cool little like synchronized pirouette together. I like that. That was visually satisfying.
It was. They did a replay a couple of times, and even the Sky Sports was like, "Oh wow, that's something there." So yeah, like just not that exciting.
Yeah, other than that, not much going on.
Yeah, to be honest, I had a hard time staying awake in the beginning of it, but there was some excitement. And there is excitement coming now with this new group of drivers we have coming into Formula One for next year. And I know there's one specifically you want to talk about. How excited are you? An American is back in Formula One.
And it all came down to the last F2 race. You know, there was a lot of pressure on Logan's shoulders. He had to finish, I think, top 5 in the standings. There was a scenario where he could finish 6th and somehow get super licensed. It was confusing, but anyway, there was a lot of pressure. It was a tight race between like 3rd and 10th in the F2 standings. He ended up, so he started the weekend in 3rd. He did drop 1 place. His teammate Liam Lawson passed him in points by 1 or 2, but 4th place was enough to secure him a full-time F1 seat with Williams next year. So we have an American back in F1.
We do. It's really, really exciting. Also, I was thinking about this. When have we ever seen this situation come up with the F1 team where it's like contingent? They like pre-announced that Logan would be their driver next year if in fact he was able to get enough points. Like, I don't think I've seen that happen.
So I think this actually happened with Yugi. Where in F2 it was kind of up in the air. I guess AlphaTauri had made it known they wanted him to be the driver and he needed to get a certain amount of points. And I think it was close, but we weren't following F2 then. So, you know, I'd have to look that up again. But, you know, think about the pressure on Logan's shoulders.
Oh my God.
You know, thinking, okay, this last race, if I double DNF in the sprint and the feature and everyone else scores points, I mean, I could lose an F1 seat on the last race.
Yeah. Talk about having to really overcome the mental side of things when you're doing that. And like, these guys are young. They are so young.
Yeah, Logan's 21.
Yeah. So I can't imagine. And I know he said in a couple of interviews, I'm just going into this like it's any other race. I'm not thinking about it. But you know, in the back of his mind, it was there.
Well, I think he performed well. In the sprint race, he locked up. Well, first off, he qualified well. He qualified P5. But in the sprint race, he locked up early on, and he had Jack Doohan on his heels the entire race with a flat spotted front tire.
Yeah.
And Jack is right behind him in the standings.
Wow.
So, you know, Logan is thinking like, if I let him pass, you know, there goes my lead in the F2 standings. And he held him off the entire race with a flat spotted front tire. I thought it was really impressive. And, you know, obviously the big points come in the feature race, but that made me confident that he was going to kind of lock it up, and he did.
Yeah.
And now we have an American back in F1, so I'm excited.
Very exciting. I'm sure Williams is excited to sell all of the merchandise that they possibly can at the 3.
I'll be buying a Williams hat, that's for sure.
At the 3 US-based Grand Prix we'll have next year. So they are definitely going to reel in the cash on that side of things.
Perfect timing, yeah.
Some 2 other newer faces we're looking forward to seeing in F1, which I feel like for these 2, it's been a long time coming. People have just been waiting for when this is going to happen. So Oscar Piastri, obviously we talked a lot about this year. There's a lot of drama, a lot of pee being spilt around this driver, but he will be taking and replacing Jan Ricciardo at McLaren next year. What do you think the dynamic's going to be like between Oscar and Lando?
I'm really interested to see it because Lando has dragged that car way further ahead than it should be anywhere in the standings. Absolutely. I mean, that it's not a great car. And he is such a great driver that car is I think he's the only podium finish outside of the big 3 teams.
Yeah.
So that car shouldn't be in a podium spot, and he put it there. But Piastri's a generational talent.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about it. F3, F4, F3, F2 winners in successive years.
Yeah.
And the only people to have done that recently are George and Charles.
He has been hyped for sure.
Everybody knows how good of a driver he is. I expect it takes him a bit to get up to Lando's level.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, maybe he never reaches Lando's level because Lando is such a good driver.
Yeah.
But it could be interesting. If he is all that he's hyped up to be, Lando has that number one seat right now, obviously. I mean, Danny Rick was nowhere near him, but if Piastri can show up well early, it'll be really interesting to see how Zach handles, because we know that Zach likes to kind of tease.
He likes to dangle the carrot.
Exactly. He did it with Pato. He did it with Oscar. He did it with Colton, So it'll be really interesting if Oscar's like his shiny new toy. And I can't imagine them putting Lando out like, in this, it's saying, oh, you're the second driver. He's too good.
Yeah, I don't think, to be honest with you, I don't think it's going to happen. I think Lando's going to look forward to having a little bit of competition, especially this year. He just, let's be real, he hasn't had competition at all with his teammate. No. So I think, if anything, it's going to see Lando up his game even more. Mm-hmm. I think he's been so overlooked this year just because of how bad that car has been. But he has really been driving at like the top of his game. Yeah.
Phenomenal.
And I think just having Oscar there will push him a little more. And I think this is like an opportunity for him to really step into that leadership role in the team. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think he's been their number one driver for a couple of years now, but I think because of his age, he's never really been looked at as a leader. Right. And I think with the year he had this year and having a younger driver underneath him now, he can really step into that kind of like team leader role. Unless he's invested a lot in McLaren. He's there for the long haul. Mm-hmm. He's made that very clear with his contract signing. So I think
he turned down, there was news that he like turned down a Mercedes contract or something like that, or sort of approached him.
I think it was Red Bull. Okay. I think Christian Horner said they've always kind of had.
That's what it was. That's what it was. Yeah.
These drivers are always putting feelers out to other teams all the time.
It says a lot because the Red Bull is the best car on the track. So for him to turn that down, he has faith in McLaren.
Yeah, I think he's in there for the long haul. So that'll be interesting. Also seeing Nick DeVries come in to AlphaTauri. Nick DeVries, he looks so young, but he is not. Mm-hmm. I think he's 27 years old, but he literally has the face of a newborn child. So I was shocked to learn. But this, I think, is really exciting because we're finally seeing. So if you don't know, Nick DeVries races in the
Formula E.
Thank you. The Formula E. I wanted to say eSIM, not eSIM. Formula E racing, which is basically electric racing, type of spec form, not Formula One cars, but it's open wheel, same situation type of deal, single seater racing. And this is the first full-time driver we're seeing come from that type of racing into Formula One. I think this is a big pat on the back for Formula One. Yeah. They've been trying to create other avenues for drivers to make it into Formula One, and we're seeing that come to fruition with Nick. What are you most excited to see about Nick coming in? So we kind of got a glimpse this year of what he could look like as a Formula One driver.
And granted, he drove against Latifi, so
right. He drove Williams though.
I know, and he drove it in the points.
Into points.
He's a good driver. He won F2, and this was not ages ago, but it's a long time ago, like you said. And I've harped on this before. Part of the issue is there's just not enough seats for talented drivers. Mm-hmm. But to your point, it's very cool to see Nick succeed in Formula E to the point where he stuck around in the F1 paddock.
Yeah.
He was a reserve driver. He, when he had his opportunity, he stepped up and scored points in the Williams. And I think teams were like, this kid's way too good to not give a seat. Right. There's tons of other young kids in F2 right now that, could be considered. Like Drugovich is a reserve driver now, and Teo Porcher for the longest time, people have been hyping him up. Mm-hmm. But it's good to see that someone who's a little bit more seasoned, who put in their time at F2, but then, kind of found another route, worked hard at that, had an opportunity in F1, took advantage of it. And now he has earned himself the seat. He deserves the seat. Yeah. And it'll be really, and the AlphaTauri is not a bad car. This year they had a rough year. But I mean, it is Red Bull based, so it's a decent car.
Yeah, they just had bad luck. I think there was just a lot of bad luck this year for that team.
And I think Yuki had a very on and off year. Mm-hmm. It'll be really interesting to see if he can outshine Yuki. this could be Yuki's last year coming up.
Do you think if Nick DeVries didn't have that opportunity to drive in that Williams and perform,
he wouldn't have a job?
You don't think he would?
I'm sure he wouldn't have an F1 job. I think he'd still be driving Team Lead.
I agree. I think that really cemented a lot of the hype surrounding him. And especially taking, let's be real, a pretty crap car and putting it in the points. And literally, he was driving another car earlier that day. He had no preparation time at all, and he was able to pull it into the points. And that helped Williams' season out actually quite a bit this year as well. So I agree. I think without that drive, I don't think we would have seen him in a Formula One car.
You're right. And it'd be interesting to think, maybe Schumacher's in the AlphaTauri seat then, but now Schumacher's out of a job.
Yeah, we'll get to that. Don't jump ahead. We've got one more, not a new face.
Not a new face.
But Nico Hülkenberg is coming back. The man doesn't die. He literally doesn't leave Formula One. He's kind of like that clingy ex that just doesn't leave.
Gunther said he's been calling him nonstop.
I know. So. And I am so conflicted with this decision. And I'll explain my reasoning. One, I think Mick is a talented driver. I just think he needs more time to develop. Okay. There's my point on Mick. But I see Haas's situation where they might not have that time to give him, right? But when I was quite surprised that they went to Nico Hülkenberg because, one, historically, him and Kevin Magnussen have just not gotten along. I know Gunther has said they're grown-ups now. They're past that. They're adults. They can work together. They have both promised me that there won't be issues. But when things get heated, I think we might see more of that come back. But two, I think Nico Hülkenberg has had plenty of opportunity to prove himself over the years, especially when he had an F1 seat, and he has not been able to produce what people think he's capable of. That's why when Haas announced this, I was like, I feel like there were other options out there that could have been better for you. What did you think when this news was announced?
I think this move was based purely on development of the car.
Okay.
I think that Nico has a ton of experience developing cars. He worked with Aston Martin after he was out of an F1 seat on their car. He has how many years of F1 experience, even if he wasn't successful,
right?
He still has that experience. He's a smart guy. We know that Danny Rick can't develop a car. That's pretty well known about him.
Yeah, that's very true.
Mick is young. He probably, isn't as fine-tuned to developing a car as Nico is. And I just didn't see any other options out there. If their goal is to develop the car. I think Mick is a good driver, and I think it's probably true that Mick is a better driver than Nico, but Haas doesn't have time to develop a driver.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, if they keep finishing 9th, 10th, they're not going to get a lot of prize money. It's going to be hard to develop their car.
Right.
We know funding's been an issue ever since Mazepin left, and they lost that big sponsorship in Eurocali. But to me, this is purely about getting the best out of their few, their financial woes with a driver who can develop a car successfully. And I think Nico has shown that he can do that, even if he's choked and hasn't scored a podium. And yes, everybody loves to make those jokes. But I personally believe that this was the right move because I don't think Mick is that good of a driver. I think I like Mick a lot, but I do think that he got his seat because of his last name and less so because of his talent. And I know people say, but he won F2. He barely won F2. And there are just better drivers out there. Nick DeVries is a better driver, and thank God he's got a seat now. But I do think like guys like Colton Herta, some of the guys that jumped from F1 or F2 to IndyCar, like Callum Ilott, Robert Schwartzman's a phenomenal driver too, and he's kind of stuck. So there's a lot of good drivers out there that I think are better than Mick. And if their goal was to go for a young driver, they could have picked, any one of those. But again, development is king for a team that's at the bottom of the standings. So that's why they went with Nico. Yeah,
I think with going with an experienced driver very much said exactly what they're trying to do. Yeah. And I know actually Gunther was on the Behind the Grid podcast. No, Beyond the Grid. Sorry. It's an F1 podcast. And he was explaining they just what you kind of said. It seems like they just don't have the time. And obviously they've been at the bottom of the totem pole for a while now, so they need to start showing some results and quickly. But who knows? Maybe Nico will rise from the ashes. Maybe we'll see him finally get that podium that he's always wanted.
He's a likable guy. And quickly on the Hulkenberg Magnussen thing, I heard Gunther say in an interview, and I thought it was a really good point, that both of these guys have lost an F1 seat and have come back. And he said that destroys your ego. So going back in, you're just grateful that you have an F1 seat. So I'm sure there will be, on track fights between them, and they might be on the radio swearing at one another. All teammates do this, right?
Yes.
But I don't think we're going to have anything like, the famous suck my, I don't think. Yes. I don't think that'll be an issue. I'm not concerned at all about that.
Haas is just like this team of like hot takes when it comes to quotes from that team. And we're just going to add that one to the mix.
Gunther's the king.
Yeah. So excited to see all of those new / coming back faces next year. Just like internal F1 team swaps. We've got Pierre going to Alpine. Really excited to see what he's going to do there.
Absolutely.
We've got an all French team with an all French driver lineup, which hasn't happened in a really long time for any team. And then we've got a Fernando Alonso going to Aston Martin. Very curious to see how that relationship's going to work out. I'm sure for him right now, it looks great with dollar signs everywhere. But I would love to see now Lawrence Stroll's put himself in a position between someone who is not afraid to blow things up when he's unhappy and his son.
Yes. No, you're right. And we were talking about this before we started recording. Aston Martin lost the 6th place spot to Alfa Romeo.
Yeah, and
in the constructors. There's no reason that they should be finishing below Alfa Romeo. And I think it's a testament to how well Valtteri did this year. He had a couple of rough races and bad luck, but otherwise I thought he did very well at Alfa Romeo. But with the money, the resources, the driving capability that Aston Martin had, how did they not finish above Alfa Romeo?
Yeah.
And Fernando's jumping into that team. Like you said, we know he'll blow teams up. I mean, look what he did with McLaren, bribing people across the.
Look what he's done with every team. Every team he's left, it's never really been like this peaceful leaving.
How is he going to accept that the owner's son is his teammate?
Right.
He can't be number one if the owner's son is his teammate.
Yeah, you're very true, but I'm curious to see if Lawrence is going to pick talent over blood.
I don't think so.
No, let's be real. Let's give Lance some credit. He has had a great season this year.
He drove great this year.
He still makes those stupid little mistakes on track, but he has these redeeming moments. And I know a lot of people have said this, like, yes, he's obviously there because of his dad and the money, but he's also proven himself from time to time. He's not just complete trash.
No.
So it will be interesting. He outperformed Sebastian Vettel this year consistently.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see just how that all plays out. And I'm sure we'll have to have like our own like Aston Martin drama segment next.
I'll bet you Drive to Survive is just going to be sitting in the Aston Martin, garage. Just exactly. Content.
So excited. All right. Well, we've mentioned who's coming in. We've mentioned who's staying, just switching teams. Let's talk about who's leaving. We'll leave the best for last. But you mentioned this a little earlier. Mick Schumacher is not returning for the 2023 season with his team or any other team. There are rumors that he might be a reserve driver for Mercedes, which I think would make sense. He's got his family, his history there. And let's be real, if you do want to try to get a seat next year, you need to try and stay in Formula One in some way, shape, or form.
Yes.
So that's sad. I do think he deserves another chance. I think he's got more in him, and we saw that this year a little bit. I just think he needs to be like paired up with a team that's willing to develop him and invest the time and effort. And I think we could see great things from him in the future, but who that team will be, that is yet to be decided.
In my opinion, the only way I think he should have a seat in F1 again is if we do gain an 11th team and we can add 2 more drivers. Then I think it's worth considering his name, but I don't think he's in the top 20 of drivers.
Okay.
Every year there's new young kids coming up through F3 and F2 who are impressing. Isaac Hadjar in F3, I think he's going to do well in F2 this year. Zane Maloney was unbelievable at the end of the year. I just don't think you have to be sticking around, taking advantage of your opportunities like Nick DeVries did in order to be one of those people who sit out, bide their time, and get in. Yeah. It's just so rare. I don't think we'll see it with Mick. I think he's had his chance, and I think he's done.
I know you say that, but 2 of the drivers that we'll see next year have done exactly what you said.
That's a good point.
For quite a while. So you never know what'll happen. I saw something on the internet. Okay. This would be like dream scenario, but we all know Audi is entering the sport. And Alfa Romeo will become the Audi F1 team. What if it was a Sebastian Vettel return and a Mick Schumacher? Like, oh my God, I think everyone would just weep. Like, that would be so cool. Obviously, it's like conspiracy theory. But I just saw that and I had to mention it.
I would be interested if Audi does something like what Mercedes or Ferrari does, is have a sister team. So there would be like an Audi F1 team and an Alfa Romeo, because they're teaming up with Alfa Romeo, right?
So they're teaming up with Sauber. Like, Alfa Romeo is leaving, and Audi's kind of taking over that.
It'd be really interesting if there was like an Audi team and then the feeder team,
kind of like how Red Bull does.
Exactly, with Red Bull and AlphaTauri. That would be great, because I think we need more teams. I know Toto will fight that to the death, but I think we need more teams. Makes for more interesting racing. We have so many talented drivers. We talk about this all the time. They need to be in F1. I would be really interested to see that. But also, it would be cool if a German team like Audi brings in 2 Germans, Nick and Seb.
And like the dynamic duo that those 2 are, and how loved they are, like from a marketing standpoint, genius.
Money.
It would be so cool. Yeah. But another person that is leaving that unfortunately I don't think we're going to see come back is Daniel Ricciardo. He is, and it has been confirmed, he has signed with Red Bull as a reserve driver / show pony, show bull, I guess you could say, for them. I just think this is the end of Danny Rick's career. Especially with him teaming up with Red Bull, like I don't think there's a path for him to enter through that team, or even the sister team. It wouldn't make any sense.
Nope.
It's sad.
It is sad, but it's time. I think he's shown that, for as old as he is, not saying he's old, but he's been around a while and he still can't develop a car. I think that's a huge problem for teams.
Especially nowadays with how the cars are, you have to be able to do that as a driver.
And everybody knows how much he struggled this year. It was really great to see him win last year. And, maybe he gets a chance if, next year Checo is terrible for some reason and they decide to get rid of him and bring Daniel up, or if Max or Checo gets sick and Daniel gets to jump in. I think that's probably the only scenario where we see Danny Rick back in an F1 car. Other than that, he'll probably just kind of fizzle out.
Yeah, it was sad to see him go. I will say his leaving did prompt me to purchase a very expensive t-shirt from his newly dropped Enchanté line. So I did snag one of those as like a souvenir. Still waiting for it. But yeah, and last but not least, the man, the myth, the legend, Sebastian Vettel's retirement. I feel like this emotionally hit me harder than I thought it would. Watching him at the end of the race, do the donuts, speak to the team, seeing him with his dad all weekend. And I just have to say, I think it speaks volumes for Seb, who he is as a person. Everybody did, all the drivers almost did some sort of tribute in some way, shape, or form to him, whether that was on their car, their helmet, or something personal they did. But like the track run they did with not just people from F1 teams, people from Formula One, the media, like everyone just loves him, and you could see that. And there was so much love this weekend for him, and it made me really happy that they kind of like sent him out like that. The looming question I have to ask you: do you think he will be able to stay away? Do you think we will see him return?
It's tough. I don't know. He didn't seem to discount it when asked. I think having a family definitely affects your decision. And I know, that will probably deter him the most of, I'm sure he's going to want to race, and he's an incredible race car driver and an even better person, clearly. Yeah. Everybody loves him, but I don't think we'll see him again, but at least in an F1 car. But I would be shocked if he's not involved with the F1 in some way. He's so intelligent, so well spoken. He understands racing well. I wouldn't be surprised if the FIA hires him to,
or a team, like almost like a Niki Lauda type of situation.
Exactly. And I think everybody would be a fan of that, because to have him around the paddock is just a positive for everybody.
Yeah.
It was sad to see him go. The fact that he's a 4-time world champion. At one point, it looked like he could have put himself into the best of all time with that Red Bull car. It is kind of sad that since then he hasn't had a ton of success.
Right.
He did okay at Ferrari. But you just kind of wish that he had kind of continued success through his career. But I think every F1 fan hopes to see Seb around the paddock.
Oh, I hope so too. And I think when you look at his career, like from when he started to where he is now, you really see this almost like true evolution of a racing driver. Come in, you're young, like eyes, whatever you call it, guns a-blazing, like you're rough and tumble, you're not afraid to get in there and elbows out and be a little cocky, and then he kind of turned into this like person that was known as an aggressive person, and also just maybe a little bit of a jerk. But then as he got older with experience, you saw him kind of just like mature and mellow out into this like really amazing race car driver, but also human at the end. And I think that was really special for a lot of people to witness. And I think a lot of people who can even say this now, like people who weren't big fans of him years ago are fans of him now.
Yeah,
so
you can't not be a fan of Seb, just as good of a man as he is. I think that is what I gathered from this last weekend in racing, is that there's just an insane amount of stories of, Seb did this for me, Seb did that for me. Like, that's just kind of the guy that he is. So as good of a driver as he was an even better human, which says a lot.
Yeah, it definitely does. And he will be sorely missed. And I was also just happy to see he had like a decent weekend this weekend. I was like crossing my fingers, please just let Sebastian Vettel have a good weekend. He had a great qualifying. He got in the points in the race, and I don't think he could have asked for anything better. I know he was still like complaining on the radio, like, with this strategy, it doesn't work. Like, I was like, oh my God, he's even fighting till the very end. But yeah, he will be missed for sure. And I feel like we need to do like some like, the song that's like
some Seb tribute video. Yeah. Some sort of Seb tribute video. We need to do.
Cue Seb tribute video.
Yes.
But yeah, we'll be missed for sure. Anything else about this weekend you think worth mentioning?
No, I'm excited for next year. A lot of young talent, obviously American driver, 3 American races. I'm so excited to see the Vegas race.
I'm excited to see the spectacle of it. Maybe I don't know if the track's going to produce that much racing, but excited to see it.
It's the spectacle. That's yeah, for sure. I'm also excited for F3 and F2 next year. There's a lot of good young drivers. Still waiting to hear if Jamie Chadwick can get an F3 seat, which is insane to me, but whatever. F2 seats are pretty much all filled up now. There's a lot of good young talent. And next year Pierre at Alpine, that's going to be awesome to see. We talked about the Netflix is probably going to be buried in Aston Martin's garage from all the drama. I'm excited to see how Nico can do stepping up and developing the car. Haas had a fluke podium, or not podium, sorry, a pole position. It'd be great to see some more of that next year. And then also, I think the big story is to see how Mercedes is going to respond, because having a third best car, that hasn't happened since they started, which 2009 or whenever that was. So I'm excited to see a Toto Wolff that's determined and angry. And like you said, they're putting that car in the front of the building to remind everybody, like, this is a hard sport. We've been dominant for so long, but like, this car was not a good car. We need to do better. It'll be really awesome to see, and especially that lineup of George and Lewis. Oh, man, I'm just really excited for next year. Yeah, me too. I'm excited to see too. This is the first year with these cars, what these teams are going to do in the off season to develop them, what they've learned from this year that they're going to take into next year. So exciting stuff to see. But yeah, I mean, we are not going away for sure. We will during the off season. I feel like everyone thinks it's like
boring, but I feel like there's a lot going on. We are not going away. We're actually going to be bringing you a couple of really cool segments that we think could be great use to you, whether you're a beginner in the sport or whether you've been watching for years and years and years. We're also going to have a couple of really awesome guests over the break. So really excited to bring those people on. And if there's anything you want to hear from us from the podcast, make sure you can follow us on all of our social media at Mr. and Mrs. F1 Pod. Feel free to DM us, drop us a message, and we'd love to hear from you. And as always, make sure to follow us there. Most of our podcasts now you can watch on YouTube. So if you're listening to this, thank you so much. And if you're watching it and listening, thank you.
Thank you again. Yeah.
It's really great. We appreciate all of your support. I know a couple of our friends have all come up to us and expressed how much they love the show. And it always makes me really happy when people seem to be enjoying it. So yeah, make sure to do that. And as always, subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. And if you're feeling extra generous, and what would help us out a lot is if you leave a review, whether you want to just leave us a couple of 5 stars, maybe if you're feeling generous, or a written review too, that would be great. All right, Mr. F1.
All right. That's a wrap for 2022.
That's a wrap for 2022 season. We're bringing you more off-season content. But until then, we will see you next week. Bye-bye.
See ya.
Bye.